Chapter 7. The Apple Barrel. We sailed at the first light of day. I was more tired than ever before, but everything was so new and interesting, I would not leave the deck. "Let's have a song!" cried one of the men. Long John began to sing that song I knew so well. 15 men on the dead man's chest, and the whole crew joined with him. Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. Even at that exciting moment, I remembered the old Admiral Benbow, and I seemed to hear the voice of old Bill, the seaman, singing with them. But soon the sails began to fill with wind, and the land and other ships moved past on each side. The Hispaniola had begun her voyage to Treasure Island. I am not going to describe the voyage in detail. The ship was indeed a good ship. The crew were good seamen, and the captain knew his business well. But Mr. Arrow was even worse than the captain had feared. The men did as they pleased with him, and after a day or two at sea, he began to drink too much. Where he got the drink was a mystery, and if we asked him, he would only laugh. Then one wild, dark night, with a rough sea, he disappeared, and was seen no more. "Fallen overboard?" said the captain. "Gentlemen, we'll do better without him." But we were without a first officer. Mr. Trelawney had been to sea before, and knew enough to be useful, and one of the men, Israel Hands, was a careful and experienced seaman who was able to help with almost anything. He was a great friend of Long John Silver. All the crew liked and even obeyed Silver, and he was always pleased to see me in the kitchen, which he kept as clean as a new pin. He kept his parrot in a cage in the corner. "I call him Captain Flint," he told me, "after the famous pirate." And the parrot used to scream, "Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8!" The captain and Mr. Trelawney still did not like each other, and the Squire didn't try to hide it. The captain spoke few words, but agreed that the crew were better than he'd hoped for, and that the ship was a fine one. The crew seemed happy, which was not really surprising. No ship's company was ever so well looked after, with plenty to eat and drink, and a barrel of apples open for any man to take one. And it was the apple barrel that saved our lives. It was the day before we expected to see Treasure Island. The sun had gone down. All my work was done, and I thought I should like an apple. The barrel was nearly empty, and I had to climb right inside to get my apple. As I sat there in the dark, the ship moving gently in the water, I almost fell asleep. Suddenly, the barrel shook as a heavy man sat down and rested his shoulders against it. The man began to speak, and it was Silver's voice. Before I had heard a dozen words, I was trembling with fear. I understood from those words that the lives of all honest men on the ship depended on me alone. "Flint was captain, not me," said Silver. In the same battle that I lost my leg, old Pew lost his sight. But I got 2,000 when I sailed with Flint, and it's all safe in the bank at home." "But what if you don't live to get home again?" asked another doubtful voice. I recognized the voice of the youngest seaman aboard. "Pirates live rough," agreed Silver. "They live dangerously, and some get caught and die by the law. But they eat and drink the best, and when the voyage is done, it's hundreds of pounds instead of hundreds of pence in their pockets. Once I'm back from this trip, I live like a gentleman. But I began life like you, a clever young seaman, without a penny in my pocket." "I didn't like this job until this talk with you, John," said the young seaman. "But I'm with you now." They shook hands so hard that the barrel shook as well, with me inside it. By this time, I understood that Silver had just turned an honest seaman into a pirate. Perhaps every man in the crew was now a pirate. Silver gave a quiet call, and a third man came and sat down with them. "Dick's with us," said Silver. "I knew Dick was all right," replied the voice of Israel Hands. "But how long are we going to wait? I've had enough of Captain Smollett." "Until the last moment," cried Silver. "Captain Smollett's a first-class seaman, and the Squire and Doctor have the map. Let them find the treasure and bring it aboard. Then we'll see. I'd rather have Captain Smollett sail us halfway home before I moved. But I know the rest of the men won't wait that long. So I'll finish with the captain and the others at the island." "But what do we do with them?" asked Dick. "They must die," said Silver. "We don't want them coming home later to tell what happened. Now, Dick, get me an apple. I'm thirsty." You can imagine my horror. I heard Dick begin to rise, but Hans said, "Oh, let's have some rum, John." Silver sent Dick to fetch the rum. Then Israel said something to the cook in a low voice, and I heard only a word or two. But they were important words. "Not another man will join." So there were still some honest men on board. I looked up and saw the moon had risen. At the same time, the voice of one of the crew shouted, "Land!" There was the sound of many feet running across the deck. I quickly got out of the barrel and was in time to join Hunter and Dr. Livesey and the rest at the side of the ship. Away to the southwest, we saw two hills. Rising behind one of them was a third hill, even higher, and with its top still hidden in fog. Captain Smollett gave orders, and the Hispaniola turned, so that the ship would sail just clear of the island on the east. "Has anyone seen that land before?" he said. "I have, sir," said Silver. "I was cook on a ship that stopped here once. There's a safe place to anchor in the south, behind a little island called Skeleton Island. Those 3 hills we can see are on the big island. They're in a row running south. The biggest is called Spyglass. Thank you, said Captain Smollett. Later on, I'll ask you to give us some help. You may go now. Dr. Livesey called me, meaning to ask me to fetch his pipe, but I spoke quickly. Doctor, get the captain and Squire down to the cabin. I have some terrible news. He went across and spoke to the other 2. Then the 3 of them went below. Soon after, a message came that I was wanted in the cabin. I told them, in as few words as possible, what Silver and the others had said, and they listened without speaking. It was a warm night, and I saw the moon shining on the sea as I told my story. "Captain," said the Squire when I'd finished, "you were right, and I was wrong. But I've never known a crew planning to mutiny that did not show some sign of it before," said the captain. "That's Silver," said the doctor. "He's a very clever man." "He'd look very clever with a rope around his neck, sir," replied the captain. "But we must make a plan. We can't go back, or they would know at once. But we have some time before the treasure is found, and there are some honest men among the crew. Your men, Squire?" "As honest as myself," agreed Mr. Trelawney. "And ourselves," said the captain. "That's 7, with young Hawkins here. Now, what other honest men are there?" "Probably the men Trelawney chose before he met Silver," said the doctor. "No," said the Squire. "Hans was one of them." "Well, gentlemen," said the captain, "we must wait and watch carefully until we know our men." Chapter 8. Treasure Island. Next morning there was no wind, and we were half a mile from the eastern coast of the island. Although the sun shone bright and hot, I hated the thought of Treasure Island, afraid of what would happen there. Because there was no wind, the small boats pulled the ship 3 or 4 miles round the island, to a safe place to drop the anchor. I went in one of them. It was hard work pulling the ship, and the men argued. Afterwards, they sat around the deck, and the smallest order was received with an angry look. "If I give another order," said the captain, "the whole crew will mutiny. Only one man can help us." "And who is that?" asked the Squire. "Silver," replied the captain. "He wants to keep things calm as much as we do. He wants the men to wait. Let's allow them an afternoon on shore. If they all go, we'll have the ship. If some go, Silver will bring them back as gentle as sheep." Guns were given to all the honest men. Hunter, Joyce, and Redruth were told what was happening, and were less surprised than we expected them to be. Then the captain went on deck to talk to the crew. "Men, you've had a hot, tiring day," he said. "The boats are still in the water. Any man who wants to can go ashore for the afternoon. You will hear a gun half an hour before the sun goes down to call you back." They all became happier at once. I think they thought they would find the treasure lying around on the beach. After some talk, 6 men stayed on board, and the others, with Silver, got into the small boats. I then had the first of the mad ideas that helped to save our lives. If 6 men were left, we could not take control of the ship. And because only 6 were left, the captain's men did not need my help. So I quickly went over the ship's side and into the nearest boat. No one took much notice of me. Only one man saying, "Is that you, Jim?" But Silver called from the other boat, wanting to know if it was me. Then I began to worry if I had done the right thing. The crews rowed to the beach, and our boat arrived first. I ran towards the trees. Silver and the rest were 100 meters behind, and I heard him shouting, "Jim! Jim!" But I took no notice, pushing through trees and bushes, and ran until I could run no longer. I was pleased to lose Long John, and began to enjoy looking around this strange island. I crossed wet ground and came to a long, open piece of sand, then went on to a place where the trees had branches that were thick and close to the sand. Just then I heard distant voices, Silver's among them, and hid behind a tree. Through the leaves I saw Long John Silver and another of the crew talking together. "I'm warning you, because I'm your friend, Tom," Silver was saying. "Silver," said Tom, "you're old, and you're honest, or so men say, and you've money too, which lots of poor seamen haven't, and you're brave. Why let yourself be led away with that kind of scoundrel? I'd rather die than—" Suddenly there was a noise of distant shouting, then a long, horrible scream. I had found one honest man here, and that terrible, distant scream told me of another. "John," said Tom, "what was that?" "That?" replied Silver. His eyes shone like pieces of broken glass in the sun. "That'll be Alan." "Alan?" cried poor Tom. "An honest and true seaman. John Silver, you've been a friend of mine, but for no longer. You've killed Alan, have you? Then kill me too, if you can." The brave man turned his back on Silver and began to walk back to the beach. With a shout, Silver threw his crutch through the air. It hit poor Tom between the shoulders, and he fell to the ground with a cry. Silver, as quick as a monkey, was on top of him in a moment. Twice he dug his knife into that poor body. As I watched, the whole world seemed to swim away before me in a mist. Silver, the birds above, the tall spyglass hill. When I was myself again, Silver was standing with his crutch under his arm, cleaning the blood from his knife with some grass. As silently as I could, I began to move away, and as soon as I was clear of the trees, began to run as I had never run before.